Hi, welcome. In this video, take a couple minutes again to respond to some more of the talking points, the kind of cheap shots, personal attacks that are happening by way of those who have already, okay, I will talk about this, sold out by way of this very popular idea in the dog training community. Again, talk about in a very specific way what represents training, what represents a process, and why it is the dog training world is in the state that it's in by way of being an absolute train wreck. Okay, if you take a look at it, it's in serious trouble, and it's not getting any better for a reason. Okay, and again, this goes into those the trainers out there, and there's many of them. Okay, and I've encountered many of them. Okay, over the last several months, even years, and it's the same response, it's the same playbook, it's the same everything. And again, when you look at the situation involving, for example, the anti-dog trainer serves as a great illustration of the response. And again, I went and watched his, I called it a cheap shot, his cheap shot walk along live stream that he does with his dog. And talking about again this whole thing about responding to what I have to say about the source of the problem, and talking about me lying, about him and blame shifting, and he goes on about in some of the videos you watch where he kind of tries to establish or affirm that what he does is solid. And understand something here, that those statements that he's making, or any trainer makes, about saying that they have the answers or are solid what they do, it's impossible to reconcile those statements based on the approach that they're how they're approaching a relationship problem between dogs and owners. And I talk about this. The only way, in terms of a predictable outcome or being intentional by way of of how again a dog's decision-making process is influenced and governed in terms of outcomes, in terms of perceptions changing, the only way that those core ingredients, and I talk about influence and control at the social level, can be reconciled properly, the only way follows a path of a interaction-based method. That's the only way to make sure that being intentional that is going to happen. Otherwise, understand it's a roll of the dice and it's a crapshoot. With again for many dogs and owners, the end result being the fact that this is why people get blindsided. And again, I talk about examples of this. You go and watch even the videos of a lot of these trainers, and you'll see where there's moments where they didn't see it coming. And so this whole thing about, and this I talk about success, how they define success, is not based on what I'm talking about. It's not based on, putting, the relationship to the test properly. Because as I said, I talk about what's the only way to reveal, and kind of like the litmus test comes through those core ingredients revealing, by way again of speaking the right language, as I call it, defined through a specific interaction-based method. That's the only way. Otherwise, again, you're operating off of appearances. You're making assumptions. And this is why I keep talking about the pairing example over and over again. So understand these trainers, they can go on all day long. But here's the other thing. The reason that these trainers, they'll look for anything, they because they can't and they won't, walk this back and actually, do a proper audit. So they look for anything at a personal level that they feel that they can use to try to discredit whoever is is putting out information this way. Because that's all it's going to be about. Understand that's all it's going to be about. But that doesn't take away anything from what I'm saying. Understand that it'd be like, no example I use because it brings up my Christian faith, and this is the example. Look at it. It'd be like me going into a church I've done this, okay? So, before I came to Christ, me looking around, right, and pointing around or looking around and trying to, discredit, right, Jesus and the real gospel, right? Trying to discredit who Jesus really is by looking around at the human, right? The fallen, corrupted human who, again, based on their behavior, is like the hypocrite, and saying, well, because that person has done this, that means that that Jesus isn't who he says he is, which is utterly preposterous and ridiculous, right? But what am I trying to do? I'm trying to change the focus. I'm trying to not confront, right, truth, right? And so when I talk about, again, this isn't about me comparing myself to Jesus at all, okay? Because when I talk about faith, I talk about, the journey with that, it's about pointing towards truth, pointing towards Jesus, not pointing towards me that way. But here's the kind of comparison part in terms of what I'm saying, is that I talk about specific information, okay? I talk about, here's a process, here's what it represents, here I talk about the congruence, here's how you put it to the test, okay? It's information specific, okay? Taking into account the human element part of that, you have to separate that, okay? So the whole point is, this is where you see a lot of these trainers that are trying to discredit each other on a personal level, but there's absolutely nothing addressed in terms of what the real problem is, or the process. When I talk about a process, core ingredients, that's not about that, right? For them, a victory is in taking down somebody for some sort of indiscretion, and to them that's what it's about. And that's, if you look around on social media, that's really what has happened. So it's the truth itself isn't about the truth, right? It's about me, myself, and I, and keeping this rig game going. That's it, okay? You really have to think about where I'm coming from here. So you get someone like the anti-dog trainer on there talking about, and he brings up the issues about, which I addressed, about my, about Dolly, my situation with that. It has nothing, I'm talking about, Dolly being a 1 percentile dog, and what I would have had to do to make that work out, okay, was separating away from and taking Dolly on like myself, okay, full, like really, but there's always the human dynamic with that, right? But it doesn't take away from anything in terms of what, and I talk about outcomes and what has to happen. I encounter that stuff that happens, people, but here's the problem in the dog training world, based on what is being marketed, many dog owners don't have a chance for success even if they wanted to, because they're not even getting the right information from the get-go, right? So this whole thing about, you get this thing about rehoming dogs, or why these dogs end up being, destroyed and killed and medicated and everything else, it comes through a bad product, okay, a bad process. And that's the problem here. So understand that when you see trainers out there who are not actually even wanting to even touch what I'm saying about what the central problem issue is, including the anti-dog trainer, that's why it's like we're saying, it's like, watch this hand, don't watch over here. Because here's the other point, is they already made their choice. Understand, it's not like the anti-dog trainer went into the dog training world first and looked around and did a proper audit. And I did that, okay, years ago, and asked the questions that need to be asked. And instead of just jumping into through balance training, or even, talk about the social level, so you can dial into a level of that at the social level, but still not get it, okay? Still that door is completely wide open for dogs ending up being blamed, because that's the result. Understand that it's impossible to say that blame shifting isn't happening if you're not, aligned specifically the way that I talk about. That's a reality. People can say whatever they want. I understand that, and I know what's going on. But all to say that, my encouragement to people is, don't be distracted here about with these trainers, understand what they're doing, and that isn't just, I'm not just saying as a marketing ploy to gain customers. Okay, I'm telling you the truth as to what the state the dog training world is in with these trainers and what they're doing. We want to get into truth, right? Like some of these trainers talk about they care about truth. Like I'd be like really? No. Okay, you don't care about truth. Okay, you're just part of the red game. Because I put it out there, like they can't. Again, the question is up front and center. There it is, right up top of my Facebook page. You go check it out. There it is. It doesn't, there's no getting away from it. Okay, these trainers that can't touch it. And so to say that you can answer or respond to it, well, you can't reconcile it based on what I'm saying. So again, go check out the information I put out. Again, I'll continue to respond. Again, these trainers, that's why they get in the mud. They want to get so personal. But if you watch my videos, even through the whole thing with the anti-dog trainer, I didn't do that. Like I didn't go and contact his clients and, all that stuff. I didn't do that. I just said, okay, and I went through his videos and got specific as to why things aren't lined up in terms of his method and showed it. That's it. You look at the situation with Goose almost, taking a hit. Okay, just look at that one video alone. Just all you have to do is watch the one video. And that should be enough for anyone who's dialed in. So anyway, all to say that these individuals, it's nothing new. So I talk about someone like the anti-dog trainer being just like this Christopher Upton out of the UK. It's amazing how closely related that both of them are. In fact, he brought that name up about this whole debate that I wouldn't debate Upton. Well, I take it further and say, go watch all of Upton's videos. You'll see some of the stuff word for word that Upton said that the anti-dog trainer is saying now. The same personal attacks, the same cheap shots, same thing, but nothing resolved, right? It's just everything's still controversy. Didn't answer the question right. And so and that just kept going on and on and on for months and years. Okay, you bring my name up on about every second or third, live stream. Go watch them. I think he's popping up for a reason, right? Because it got under his skin, right? Not because I was getting personal with him. I did that thing because it bothered him, right? Because it's like he knew he knew that I was hitting a nerve because he couldn't. I mean, what do you do if you were already made? And this is the problem. If you've already put up your 1,000 videos, you've already put your stake in the ground, right? And see, this is the thing to talk about. If you already are selling your product, well, what do you think you're going to do? You can't back out of it. Okay, it's going to get dirty, right? You're going to get personal because it's not like there's wiggle room here. I'm being very specific as to what the source of the problem is. And guys like the anti-dog trainer, they already made their bed, okay? They already made their bed. So what do? Okay, you're going to do what he's doing. So people can follow him all they want. That's the thing. People get bitter and stuff. Of course, you're going to follow a guy like that, and that's what's happening with some of these people. Because you see the same behavior, they're just angry, upset, bitter. What else are you going to say? So because that's just where we're at in the dog training world. So the information I put out isn't popular. Okay, it isn't going to win awards based on the current state of the dog training community, but it's the truth. That's it, and you can't get around it. I mean, you want to find the truth, well, you'll find it right where you left it. Okay, that's the problem here. The truth is the truth. It is. There's the question. It's information specific. Go look at the thing. I talk about the criteria. I talk about how these trainers, how are they, assessing that the possessive dogs are changing based within the framework of response. Like, what is it? There it is. Like, what's the criteria they're using to establish that? And I get into that. So there's no way around it. There it is. Thanks for watching.